My sister gave a speech at my wedding, sneering as she said, she's always needed attention, even faked an illness in high school to get out of exams. People chuckled. One guest even whispered, still the same manipulator. But then, my maid of honor stood up, she didn't fake it. I was there. She held up a bracelet. This was hers in the hospital. Ask me what it means. You really think I faked being sick just to skip exams? I asked, my voice cracking slightly even after all these years. Mallory shrugged across the table, her wine glass swirling in her hand. It wasn't just me who thought it, Harp. Everyone did. Tessa leaned forward, voice calm but firm. That's because you made sure of it, Mallory. The three of us sat there, a tense triangle over the half-eaten rehearsal dinner, as the weight of the past quietly crushed the excitement of tomorrow. Story begins. Growing up in Asheville, North Carolina, you learned early that appearances mattered. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where the lawn was always manicured, the porch light always fixed, and the smiles at the grocery store a little too tight. My sister, Mallory, fit perfectly into that world. She was the golden child, shiny blonde hair, a quick laugh that made adults melt, the right friends, the right grades, the right everything. And then there was me, Harper. Always with a book tucked under my arm, gangly, overly emotional, the one who didn't get invited to the sleepovers but always heard about them the next Monday at school. Mallory was 2 years older, but the gap between us felt like decades. She ruled high school like she ruled our house, effortlessly. There was this particular day burned into my memory like a scar during my sophomore year. I'd been feeling off for days. Exhausted, head pounding, a deep ache settling into my bones. I pushed through, not wanting to draw attention to myself, knowing any sign of weakness would somehow make it back to Mallory and her circle. But during my chemistry final, the room blurred. The last thing I remember is the cold, sharp edge of the desk against my temple as I collapsed. I woke up hours later in Mission Hospital, fur taped to my arm, my mom's tight-lipped frown the first thing I saw. Diagnosis, mononucleosis. Severe case. 2 weeks in the hospital, then another month at home recovering. Somewhere between me collapsing and being discharged, a rumor had started that I faked the whole thing. A rumor Mallory didn't just allow, she fueled. I heard the whispers at school when I finally returned. Drama queen, they'd murmur behind their hands. Anything to get out of finals. Mallory never corrected them. When I confronted her, cornered in the upstairs hallway of our house one evening, she just laughed. You're so dramatic, Harp. You should hear yourself. I pushed all that deep down. Buried it under years of therapy and distance. Until my wedding. When Simon proposed at the peak of Craggy Gardens, I didn't think about Mallory. I thought about him. About building a life separate from the tight, judgmental world we both grew up in. The wedding planning brought Mallory back into focus whether I liked it or not. My mother assumed she would be my maid of honor. I didn't even hesitate before telling her no. I chose Tessa, my college roommate, the woman who sat by my hospital bed all those years ago, the one person who knew the real version of me. It wasn't a big, screaming fallout when I told Mallory. Just a tight, almost invisible shift like a storm cloud creeping over a sunny afternoon. She smiled a little too brightly at family dinners, made passive-aggressive jokes in the group chat, and barely masked her disdain for Simon. Still, I convinced myself it would be fine. It had to be fine. The day of the wedding dawned clear and warm. We held it outdoors at the Biltmore Gardens, blooms bursting in every color imaginable, guests laughing and mingling as music floated on the spring air. During the reception, the speeches began. Simon's brother told a heartfelt, if slightly awkward, story about Simon's terrible attempts at cooking. My dad spoke next, getting misty-eyed halfway through. I glanced over at Mallory, perched in her seat, wine glass in hand, the perfect picture of composed elegance. When her name was called for the next toast, I smiled tightly, hoping, praying that she would just keep it simple. She didn't. She stood, cleared her throat dramatically, and launched right into it. At least Harper finally found someone who doesn't mind being the center of attention, she said with a tinkling laugh. A few polite chuckles rippled through the room. She's always needed it, you know. Ever since high school. Like that time she faked being sick during finals to get out of exams? This time, the laugh was louder. I felt my face go cold. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw an uncle lean toward his wife and whisper, "Still the same manipulator." I thought I might be sick. The ground felt unsteady beneath me, and all the old shame, all the years of being called dramatic, came rushing back like a tidal wave. I opened my mouth to say anything, but before I could, Tessa was already standing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't yell. She just spoke clearly, simply. She didn't fake it, she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. I was there the day she collapsed. I watched her be carried out on a stretcher. I visited her every day at the hospital. Tessa reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, silver hospital bracelet so old now the writing was faded, but still legible. She held it up for everyone to see. This was hers. Room 412 at Mission Hospital. I kept it because she thought no one would believe her. Guess she was right. There was a long, awful silence. Mallory's face paled visibly, her hand clenching around her glass. I don't know if she was more embarrassed or furious. Someone clapped awkwardly. Then another. Then the entire room politely shifted attention elsewhere, away from Mallory, away from the messy, ugly truth dangling in the air. Tessa sat back down beside me, squeezing my hand under the table. Simon leaned in, whispering, "I love you." I just nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The rest of the evening played out like a poorly scripted play everyone had decided to pretend was going well. Mallory didn't leave immediately. She stayed seated, dabbing at the corners of her mouth with her napkin, acting as if nothing had happened. But you could feel it, that prickly tension that clung to the air around her like humidity before a thunderstorm. People avoided her. It wasn't overt, no one was rude. But conversations shifted when she approached. Groups that had been laughing seconds earlier suddenly remembered they needed a drink refill or had to find their spouse. Simon and I tried to keep things moving, thanking guests, dancing, smiling for pictures. But underneath it all, my mind kept replaying her speech in a loop. The smirk. The casual cruelty. The way she had always been able to swing people's opinions like a pendulum. The reception wound down slowly. Simon's aunt caught my arm at one point, pressing a warm hand against my shoulder. "Honey," she murmured, her voice low, "don't you let anyone rewrite your story. You hear me? Anyone." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Tessa stayed by my side like a silent bodyguard. She didn't say much, but her presence was a comfort, solid and unwavering. When it was finally time for the last dance, I caught a glimpse of Mallory near the bar, talking to one of her old high school friends. Their heads were close together, their faces tight. Gossiping. Always gossiping. At one point, Mallory looked over at me and for a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. Gone was the haughty smirk, the polished smile. In its place was something rawer. Something almost like guilt. But just as quickly, it was gone. She turned back to her friend, tossing her hair over her shoulder, laughing too loudly. Simon and I escaped the reception under a rain of sparklers, climbing into the car that would take us to our hotel downtown. Asheville's city lights blurred past the windows. I leaned my head against Simon's shoulder, feeling the weight of the night settle heavily into my bones. The next morning, we had brunch with close friends and family at a small local cafe called Early Girl Eatery. I wasn't surprised when Mallory didn't show up. My mother did, though wearing her best strained smile and sitting stiffly at the end of the table. Halfway through brunch, after awkward small talk about weather and traffic and the Biltmore's tulips, she finally broached the subject. "Your sister's very upset," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I set down my fork carefully. "Is she?" "She feels humiliated," my mother continued, dabbing her mouth with a napkin as if she could wipe away the unpleasantness of the conversation. "In front of all those people. She didn't mean anything by it. You know how she jokes." I stared at her for a long moment. She made a joke about me faking a serious illness, I said, my voice even measured. At my wedding. It was just nerves, my mother said quickly. You know she gets uncomfortable when all the attention isn't on her. The words hung there between us. Heavy. Ugly. Simon shifted beside me but didn't say anything. He knew me well enough by now, knew when I needed to find the words myself. I picked up my coffee cup, feeling the warmth bleed into my palms, grounding me. Maybe it's time, I said slowly, that Mallory learns what it feels like when the world doesn't cater to her discomfort. My mother's lips thinned into a straight line, but she didn't argue. She knew. Deep down, she knew. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. Simon and I stayed local for a mini honeymoon, hiking the trails off the Blue Ridge Parkway, exploring little bookstores and antique shops, trying to shake off the heavy residue of the wedding. But the texts started trickling in. First from Mallory, hope you're happy. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Then from my father, maybe just apologize so we can move past this. Apologize. Me. For being humiliated at my own wedding. Each text felt like a slap, a reminder of every family dinner where I'd been expected to swallow my hurt to keep the peace. Simon saw the way my hands shook as I read them. You don't have to answer, he said simply. You don't owe them anything. It was strange freeing, even how true it felt. By the time we returned to real life, I had made a decision. A quiet, firm decision. I wasn't going to chase Mallory's approval anymore. I wasn't going to contort myself into something more palatable just so my parents wouldn't feel uncomfortable. If that meant fewer family dinners, so be it. If that meant being labeled the difficult one again, so be it. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. The months after the wedding felt like moving through a slow, sticky fog. Life carried on, work deadlines, grocery lists, oil changes, but underneath it all was this gnawing awareness that something fundamental had shifted. Mallory and I barely spoke. When we did, it was surface level. Happy birthday, tell the kids I said hi, Mom's planning Thanksgiving, are you coming? Each message was like walking barefoot across broken glass, sharp, painful, and forcing me to tread carefully to avoid bleeding out completely. My parents tried to act like nothing had changed. If anything, they doubled down on pretending. When we gathered at my childhood home for Sunday dinners, my mother would fill the silence with overly bright chatter about Mallory's new Pilates classes or the neighbor's renovation project, as if the air wasn't thick with things unsaid. Mallory, for her part, became a master of passive aggression. She'd post thinly veiled jabs on Facebook. Photos of her kids with captions like "so proud of my little ones for being so resilient. They don't need constant attention to feel loved." Or she'd make offhand comments at family events, "Some of us don't need a whole parade just to feel seen," always with a smile, always just loud enough for me to hear. I didn't bite. I didn't respond. I simply stopped. It was strange at first the way silence became my armor. I had spent so many years fighting to be heard, to be understood, to prove I wasn't the villain Mallory made me out to be. Now, I realized I didn't need her to believe me. Her version of the past didn't have to be my prison anymore. Fall crept into Asheville with a slow, crisp coolness. The Blue Ridge Mountains turned to fire reds and oranges and gold stretching across the horizon like spilled paint. Simon and I went hiking nearly every weekend. We'd pack sandwiches and thermoses of coffee, drive up winding roads past pumpkin stands and apple orchards, and spend hours walking trails littered with fallen leaves. Sometimes we talked about everything: jobs, plans, memories. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt safe. Still, there were moments, unexpected, sharp moments when grief would sneak up on me. Not grief for Mallory as she was, but grief for the sister I had wanted her to be. The one who would have stood by my hospital bed without being asked. The one who would have cheered for me at my wedding instead of tearing me down. There was a specific Saturday early November when it hit particularly hard. Simon and I had just finished a long hike up Black Balsam Knob. The view at the summit was breathtaking, a rolling sea of color under a sharp blue sky. I pulled out my phone to snap a photo and without thinking, scrolled past a text from my mother. Remember, Thanksgiving at 5 p.m. Please come. Mallory will be there. The familiar knot tightened in my chest. The ache of obligation. The endless tightrope walk between being the good daughter and protecting myself. I sat on a flat rock, the wind tugging at my jacket, and stared out at the mountains. I thought about what Tessa had said weeks ago over coffee: you can't heal in the same environment that broke you. I turned to Simon. What if we didn't go to Thanksgiving? I said quietly. He didn't hesitate. Then we don't go. But it wasn't that simple, of course. The pressure started almost immediately. My mother called, her voice syrupy sweet but threaded with panic. Honey, it won't be the same without you. You know how important family is. My father texted short, clipped messages. It's just one dinner. Can't you put the past behind you? Even my aunt, who had always been slightly removed from the drama, chimed in. Maybe Mallory's finally ready to apologize. Give her a chance. The thing was, I didn't believe that. Mallory wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for being called out. There's a difference. Simon and I sat at our kitchen table the night before Thanksgiving, plates of takeout Chinese between us, the invitation hanging heavy in the room. I chewed slowly, staring at the condensation on my water glass. Maybe we should go, I said, more to myself than to him. Just to keep the peace. Simon set down his chopsticks. At what cost? He asked gently. At what cost? I thought about the panic attacks I used to get before family events. The way I would rehearse conversations in my head, trying to anticipate every slight and jab. The way I would drive home afterward, heart pounding, rehashing everything I should have said but didn't. I'm tired, I said finally. I'm tired of bleeding just so they don't have to feel uncomfortable. Simon reached across the table and took my hand. Then let's start a new tradition. And just like that, a decision that had once felt impossible now felt inevitable. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and misty, the kind of weather that made everything feel a little slower, a little heavier. Simon and I spent it differently than I ever had growing up. No endless hours in a crowded living room with football blaring from the TV, no forced smiles across a table where resentment simmered just below the surface. Instead, we stayed home. We cooked together, nothing fancy, just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. We ate on the couch, wrapped in blankets, watching old movies and letting the day pass quietly, peacefully. It should have felt freeing. And in some ways, it did. But part of me still kept checking my phone. Half expecting, half dreading a message, a missed call, some last-ditch effort from my family to reel me back in. The first text came just after 6 p.m. From my mother. Hope you're having a good day. We missed you. Mallory made the green bean casserole. It was innocuous on the surface, but I could feel the sting underneath, the sharp little reminder of what I had chosen to miss. An hour later came another. Your father is disappointed. Short. Cold. A punch to the gut I wasn't ready for, no matter how much I had braced myself. Simon reached over and gently took the phone from my hands. Not today, he said simply. I let him set it face down on the coffee table, forcing myself to breathe through the rising tide of guilt. It amazed me sometimes how deeply rooted the guilt was, how easily it bloomed even now, even after everything. As if setting boundaries made me selfish. As if choosing peace made me cruel. The real fallout didn't come until the weekend. We had just finished cleaning up breakfast when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Neither was Simon. When I opened the door, Mallory was standing there. No text, no call, just her, in a sharp wool coat, holding a cardboard box. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Can I come in? She asked finally. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Simon stayed close, hovering just out of sight but within earshot. He didn't trust her, not after everything, and honestly, neither did I. Mallory set the box down on the kitchen counter without ceremony. Inside were a few random things: an old photo album, a set of mixing bowls I'd loaned my mother months ago, a couple of books I'd left at my parents' house years ago. A strange, mismatched collection of memories and forgotten belongings. "Mom thought you'd want these," she said, voice clipped. I folded my arms across my chest, waiting. Mallory fidgeted, smoothing down the sleeves of her coat. She looked off. Tired. Brittle in a way I hadn't seen before. "I don't know why you're doing this," she said finally, her voice rising slightly. "You think cutting everyone off makes you strong? It just makes you look bitter." I felt a familiar rush of emotion, the urge to defend myself, to explain, to fix rising up like a reflex. But I forced myself to stay still. To let the silence settle. Mallory shifted, uncomfortable. "You embarrassed me," she said, softer now. "In front of everyone. At your wedding." I blinked at her. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't believe she was serious. "You embarrassed yourself," I said, my voice even, careful. She flinched, just slightly. For a moment, the wall between us cracked. I saw something flicker in her eyes: hurt, anger, maybe even regret, but just as quickly, it was replaced by cold indifference. "Whatever," she muttered, grabbing her keys from the counter. "Just don't expect everyone to wait around forever while you figure it out." And with that, she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving nothing but silence and the cardboard box on the counter like a tombstone for whatever relationship we used to have. The holidays passed in a blur after that. Christmas invitations came and went. I declined politely, citing other plans that didn't exist. New Year's Eve found Simon and me sitting on our back porch, wrapped in blankets, drinking champagne out of mismatched mugs as fireworks echoed faintly over the mountains. It should have felt lonely. It didn't. It felt clean. Like breathing real air after years of living in a smoke-filled room. But of course, Mallory wasn't done. The next phase wasn't confrontation. It was something more insidious: erasure. Family group chats continued without me. Photos were posted online, smiling gatherings where my absence was never mentioned but always felt. When my mother sent a group email about planning a family reunion in the Outer Banks that summer, my name wasn't even included in the initial list of attendees. It was clear, they had closed ranks. I had drawn a boundary, and they had decided I was the problem. Simon watched me process it all in silence, not pushing, just being there. One night, after I finally shut my laptop in frustration, he spoke. "You can grieve it, Harp," he said quietly. "Even if they were never what you needed them to be." And I did. Not all at once. Not neatly. Not in some big, dramatic breakdown. It was slower than that. Crying over a forgotten photo. Feeling a pang when a cousin posted baby pictures I hadn't been sent. Seeing old Christmas ornaments in a box and wondering if my parents even noticed they were missing. Grief wasn't a straight line. It was 1,000 tiny paper cuts that slowly scabbed over. The months rolled by. Spring arrived again in Asheville, painting the hills green, coaxing dogwoods and wild azaleas into bloom. Simon and I settled into our routines: weekend hikes, movie nights, small dinners with real friends who didn't treat love like a transaction. I thought about my family less and less. Not because the hurt was gone, it wasn't. But because it didn't rule me anymore. It didn't get to decide the shape of my days. Still, sometimes grief would sneak in at strange angles. When I heard about a family barbecue I wasn't invited to. When I saw my cousins post photos at Mallory's kid's birthday party, all smiles, no trace of me. When Mother's Day came and went with a strained phone call that felt more like an obligation than love. Simon would listen quietly, letting me sort through it at my own pace. He never pushed. Never tried to fix it. "You get to choose," he reminded me once. "You don't have to keep playing a rigged game." It stuck with me, those words. You get to choose. That summer, a curious opportunity landed in my lap. Through a friend of a friend, I was offered a chance to participate in a local storytelling event, kind of like The Moth, where ordinary people shared real stories from their lives in front of an audience at the Diana Wortham Theatre downtown. The theme? Unwritten stories, things left unsaid. At first, I laughed it off. What would I even say? But late one night, curled up on the couch while a thunderstorm rumbled over the mountains, I found myself opening my laptop and typing. It poured out of me faster than I could edit or second guess. The story of growing up invisible. Of collapsing during a final and waking up accused of lying. Of spending years twisting myself into knots to earn love that should have been unconditional. Of finally painfully choosing myself. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The truth was powerful enough on its own. I submitted the piece anonymously. No expectations. No attachments. A week later, I got the email. I was selected to perform. When the night of the event came, I was nervous. Hands shaking. Heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Simon squeezed my hand backstage. "Just tell your story," he said. "You don't owe anyone anything else." When my name was called, I stepped onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The audience was a dark, humming sea. I took a deep breath and began. I spoke plainly. Honestly. I didn't dramatize. I didn't embellish. I just laid it bare, the sister who turned my illness into a punchline. The parents who taught me silence was survival. The wedding that ripped the last threads of pretense apart. The choice to walk away, even when it hurt. There were tears in the audience. Soft sniffles. A few murmured wows. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, a deep, heavy stillness before the applause started. And it didn't stop for a long, long time. I thought that would be the end of it. But the universe, funny and messy as it is, had other plans. Unbeknownst to me, the event had been recorded and posted online by the organizers. Within days, it started to spread, first locally, then beyond. People related to it. Shared it. Commented things like, "I see myself in this. Thank you for putting this into words." I thought I was alone. I didn't care about the numbers. But it felt good. Right. Real. And then about 2 weeks later I got a text from my cousin, Marissa. "You might want to check Facebook." Faced with tears of joy, curious, I opened the app. And there it was. Mallory's page, public, filled with posts raging about betrayal and false narratives and how certain people were airing dirty laundry for sympathy. Comment after comment of her friends, some siding with her, many not debating, speculating, asking questions she clearly wasn't prepared to answer. Some even linked the video, recognizing pieces of the story. She had exposed herself without me ever having to name her. There was a bitter, delicious irony in it. For once, Mallory couldn't control the story. She couldn't twist it or bury it or laugh it away. The truth was out there and people saw it for what it was. No yelling. No confrontations. No cruelty. Just reality, standing there unbothered, while she unraveled all by herself. My phone buzzed again later that night. A text from my mother. "Your sister is very hurt. Please take the video down. Family is sacred." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I set the phone down and turned it face down, just like Simon had taught me. And I laughed, a real, deep, from the belly laugh, the kind that felt like breaking chains. We never did take the video down. I never apologized. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. Mallory had spent years weaving a story where I was the villain, the manipulator, the liar. She never thought I would stop playing along. She never thought the truth would slip past her defenses and stand tall in the light. But it did. And standing there, side by side with Simon, with real friends, with my own hard-earned peace, I realized something important. The best revenge isn't anger. It's thriving. It's living a life so full, so honest, so bright that it burns away the shadows others tried to trap you in. And God, did it feel good.